when you have an externally focused, when you have a cause, when you have a mission, then that becomes like the magnet, right? And certain people are going to be drawn to that. Other people are going to be repelled, and that's okay. You got to be able to hold your cause out so clear that other people who are like purposed get attracted to it. And then like a partner, that's a person, right? So like purpose people doing, calm things, that's collective impact. So,
yeah.
Today, we will be hearing from Jared Arnett, who calls himself the Appalachian or rural optimist, and has spent his career helping teams and rural communities do things that have never been done. He was the founding executive director of Shaping Our Appalachian Region, is the network leader for Together for the Mountains, co-founded Mountain Music Exchange, which is now the largest retailer of guitars in Eastern Kentucky, and serves as the founding pastor of New Beginnings Fellowship Church. Jared lives just outside of Pikeville, Kentucky with his wife, Bethany, and their two amazing children, Rosalind and Harker.
Hey guys, welcome back. We're here with Jared Arnett for part 2 of our conversation, thinking about networking, community engagement, and partnerships. And Jared, I want to pick up a little bit where we left off on this idea of partnerships. Now, earlier you were talking about this idea of conveners, of people who have a common cause. And in particular, when we are trying to serve our communities, that our cause is not the internal focus of our organization or church, but it's really those that we're out there to serve and to reach. And so I had this thought, I don't know, I think it was actually when we were starting to get into Eastern Kentucky, our church, and thinking about a different model, because what we were doing wasn't sustainable. And so I started to ask this question. I said, we care about these kids in Eastern Kentucky. We're in Breathitt County. We care about these kids in Eastern Kentucky. We have a Wednesday night program. We have a Sunday morning program. Who else cares about these kids that could come alongside us and help us so we can sustain it and grow it? And so that started me down the pathway of partnerships, right? Who else cares about whatever I care about? And this is certainly relevant for church, but also healthcare organizations who are trying to serve people, any industry where you're trying to serve somebody, a cause, you have a purpose, this idea of who else cares about them. So maybe you could unpack a little bit more about when you're selecting partners and looking for partners, how do you do that? And I think earlier you mentioned something about like, you can go alone, you can go with people, or you can actually like create stuff together. So maybe you have a little bit of a filter for making some of that evaluation. So when you think about partnerships, how do you decide who to partner with and how to go forward together?
Yeah, I think I'm always thinking win-win. I think you've got to be thinking of understand the organization that you're going to meet with, that you're talking to. What is their heart? What is their mission? What are they trying to accomplish? What are the barriers that they're up against right now that's preventing them from being as successful they'd like to be? And the partnership can't be one-sided. The partnership, kind of like what we're talking about with network, it can't be just like, you could really help me do this.
Yeah.
You've got to see the reciprocal of that. Like, this is going to help you, So, for example, if we were working with a group that organizes mission teams from churches to go on foreign missions, and they wanted to partner with us Together for the Mountains, well, one, we'd kind of like, and they have some domestic locations. We would like some teams to land here and help us in some of our projects. We'd love to be one of their options destinations. They could partner with us on that. But we'd also love to connect them with lots of churches in our region that have never gone on large mission trips, that they would love to have the heart to do that. They don't know how to do that. And so it's like all that becomes a potential win-win-win for everyone. And so I think looking for that is the way that this is a good partnership for everybody that's involved.
Let me add in real quick for a sec. Someone told me, and you just said it there. First, there's win-win, which is the idea of, you have certain goals or needs or barriers. We have certain goals, needs, barriers, and a win-win means it's mutually beneficial. And actually, I think, in in the New Testament in 1 Corinthians 12, talking about the body, it talks about this mutual concern for one another. And I
Yeah.
think one space where Christians really should be leading the way is to say, I care about you, you care about me. We care for each other. And if you're up, I'm up. If you're down, I'm down. We actually care more
Yeah.
about each other than we do ourselves. And if I care about you and you care about me, then together we're gonna be better, you know. So mutual concern. But it's not just win-win. It really is win, small w, win, small w, win, capital W, meaning
fair.
you've got a small win, I've got a small win, but together we can get the big win, you know, whatever the greater cause is. And so, yeah, a good friend of mine, Alan, taught me the win-win and then the capital W.
I love that.
So I think, and that's it, right? Who else cares about the big win here? And
Right.
you've got a certain contribution, I've got a certain contribution. It's going to help us both, but together we're going to do a better job.
Accomplish this thing.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And for us, that's leave Eastern Kentucky better than we found it. You know, that's kind of the heart. And we're going to talk about Together for the Mountains.
Yeah.
Shortly. And that's really the heart behind the whole thing, is how do people have faith move outside the walls of the church and leave Eastern Kentucky better than we found it.
That's right.
And so, yeah, I think you find people who care about that, who have a heart for that. And in doing that, you're going to meet people who don't, right? Which can be very
okay, right? And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just they're not going to align with your heart and your value and your dreams and your vision. And you know, I've had some of those meetings where, you know, you just kind of get like blank stares, and you realize that it's not wrong, it's not bad. It's just like God has you moving with a different direction, and you can't get discouraged in those. I think that's one thing that can happen. Is one person who's like, I don't know, that's kind of crazy. You know, when you're working on big things, you're going to meet those people. You know, we're working on in our church ministry where we bought this old boxing gym in Pike One, working to bring it back to life. And it's got an incredible story. A guy who was a Christian who founded it and started it, and died in a car accident, and had a heart for it to eventually be like a boys and girls club. And so we bought it last summer, and I was over there the other day, and I never met the neighbor that has a house right beside it. And she was driving by, and she stopped and was talking to me. And we had a missions team there working, and she said she was offering to let the kids jump on the trampoline or something, you know, while they were working in between. And then she said, I can't believe that church bought this. I don't know what they're thinking. Like, this thing just needs torn down, you know. And so I just listened for a little bit. I was like, well, I'm the pastor of the first of the bunch. And she kind of paused for a second, and then I could see that she was surprised. But you're always going to have those people that don't join the partnership, that don't jump in, that don't have the vision. Yeah, I always think of Nehemiah. Man, he had all kinds of people. Yeah, you know, the guys that were walking by laughing and saying, man, if a fox jumped on that wall, it'd fall down. You know, you just got to ignore it and go on.
Well, I was talking with a friend today. It's a hard time to be a leader, and there's a lot of critics out there. There's always been critics.
Yeah.
But, you know, especially with social media now, everybody's an expert in everything somehow.
Yeah.
And whatever you're doing, somebody else thinks they surely know how to do it better. So there's going to be criticism. There's going to be people who don't get it. They don't get the same capital W win. You know, they're not going after the same thing. And I think at some point you just have to let that roll off your back, say, hey, God's called me to do something, and keep going. But the thing is, when you have an externally focused, when you have a cause, when you have a mission, then that becomes like the magnet, right? And certain people are going to be drawn to that. Other people are going to be repelled, and that's okay. You just, you got to be able to hold your cause out so clear that other people who are like purposed get attracted to it. And then, like a partner, that's a person, right? So if you don't know what your cause is, and I think this is where there's a lot of leadership shift that needs to happen, is because in a generation before us, I feel like we're a lot of personality driven leaders or charisma. And so people would attach to a person. And then if that person was doing great, they were great. But if that person fell apart, they would fall apart. What's different now is I think we need to be holding out purpose. We need to be holding out causes And then that can draw people together. So like purpose people doing, common things, that's collective impact. So
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
out there.
And like you said, you can be working together, collaborating on something, which means I've got this existing program, you've got this existing program. We'll both kind of they complement each other. Let's do it. The cool part for me is when groups say, "Hey, to do this, we could change our program, or we could create a new thing that works with. If you'll create a new thing, or if you'll shift some of your budget toward this, we'll shift." Like they start changing internally.
Then right.
Oh man, that's when it's like they really trust each other and they're creating something completely brand new. Um, it gets fun for me because it's we used to talk about like that craft of doing things that have never been done, for inside an organization or multiple organizations. It's that multiple teamwork. It's everybody has to be frustrated with the way things are right now. Like if you can't get to that point, if everybody thinks everything's all right and the status quo is cool, then you're done. So you got to do a good job communicating why the way it is right now is not okay. Um, and then you've got to have some semblance of casting that vision of what is possible, how it could be, and then arranging the team and empowering them to come up with the solutions. That was, oh man, I can't remember the guy's name, but he talked about this idea of when you bring multiple people together like that and partnerships, it's not linear. It's not 1+2=3. It's 1+2=blue. Or
Yeah, right.
you don't know what you're going to get out of it,
Right.
but it's going to be something different. And
Yeah, the
and
mixture of all those things creates something that's bigger than all the individual parts. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah,
yeah, that's right. And that we talked in an earlier episode about so many leaders have a view in their mind of what to do, and they try to get buy-in, which basically means they try to like sell people on their idea. And eventually people realize, man, you're just trying to sell me on your thing, But when you have a cause, a purpose, and you invite people into that, and then you create something together, that's ownership at its core, right? I mean, we are literally creating together. And that's where you get full engagement. That's where people are all in, right? Because they are designing and implementing it together. And that's the part. Yeah. I really think that's the future of work, period. I think it's the future of leadership. It's what's needed right now for a lot of reasons. But you're putting your finger on the shifts that start to happen, an unwillingness to keep the status quo, a clear picture of the purpose, inviting other people, holding that purpose out and seeing who gets attracted to it, and then saying, hey, at what level do you want to go in on this? Do you want to kind of work alongside each other, complement on a project, or do we want to get in and create together? And any one of those is okay, really. It's just kind of defining, I think, what our roles are together. And as long as we're clear on that, then you can move forward.
And making sure everybody realizes no matter how much they're in, if they're in at all doing something, they've got value. Like they are a part of this team that's moving the whole vision forward.
Yeah, that's good stuff. All right. Well, I could talk about that forever, but I want to ask you a question here about bivocational ministry. Now, you have a lot of hats. Just even I was sort of joking about your email signature, but a lot of different titles there, and I wear a good number of hats too. And it's brought into my mind this idea of the leader of the future, in particular pastors, but not just pastors, anyone, that there's probably a shift toward multiple hats that's happening right now. And there's really pros and cons. I'm not saying one thing is right or wrong, but I'm starting to see, especially in churches where resources are tighter or limited, and if we're ever going to really stay and make impact in rural environments, there's often just you're not going to pass the plate on your holler church and feed your family and everything you need to do. So you're probably going to have some multiple streams of income, which also means multiple commitments, those kind of things. So could you just kind of, what do you think is some of the benefits and maybe some of the challenges of that bivocational world that we're either in or maybe stepping into even more here going forward?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pros to the bivocational world in that I think there's a lot of benefit to being around people who aren't believers. Just it's real easy if I was just pastoring and only talked to my church members and occasionally saw other people out, at dinner or what, like it's really hard to understand their questions, their concerns, their real thoughts about Jesus or why they're not coming or how you address them. So to be in situations where you're interacting consistently with the people who aren't believers and a chance to share your faith in that way is important. It also helps you understand, I think, what your congregation is going through from a work standpoint and life, and maybe it helps you relate to that. Um, I'll say, yeah, I think everybody's kind of got their. I was made to be a starter, an entrepreneur, and I've got gifts that work well in some ways as a pastor. I've got gifts that don't. I'm not great at the one-on-one consistent care, shepherding, talking, making sure I fall like that's not in my I love people. I'm an introvert. So like too much energy, too much time with people and I'm completely drained. Um and so thankfully we've got somebody on our team, Chris, who is just like he could talk to people one after another all day long, and like he's fired up at the end of it. I'm like, man, I don't know how you do it, but I'm glad you do.
Wow.
After all that, and so for me, I tried to keep those two things. Like, am I going to be a pastor or an entrepreneur? Like, and then it was like finally, I was like, I'm just the way God made me, and I think. And I have to, I've got one thing that I'm a partner in that is a for-profit effort. It's the guitar store, Mountain Music Exchange. And the rest are social enterprise or connected to the church or nonprofits. And I spend a half day a month with the team at Mountain Music Exchange. Um, and I'm always checking my motivation. Like there's things I could be doing to generate revenue. If I have to for my family, I've got things I could do. I have a heart to help other communities and regions. I love rural development, community development, economic development in rural communities. I've not done a lot of that in the last year or two. I'd love to do it again at some point. But I think checking your motivation. Why am I doing? Am I like I could probably make more money putting a lot of those things to the side and focus on something else. But if my heart is to do that at the music store because I love music, I love to see kids learn the guitar. I love to see them walk out the first time with a guitar because I remember that day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Hey, what
Yeah.
kind of guitar growing up? What was your guitar growing up? Your first guitar?
Well, my first one was a Washburn acoustic.
Nice.
I still got it. But like I think that's an okay motivation. The motivation is like I got to build, 5 stores, brick and mortar stores. So I've got this retirement. I'm getting to this, this financial goal solely. I just got to check that on myself and say, yeah, God, where you want me? What you want me doing? But it's helped our church. If I was not vocational, we would not be in the building in the location that we are doing, giving 10%, sometimes 15% of our offerings into community projects. And so it takes the pressure off there for them to provide for our family. So I think there's lots of pros. I also know guys who are just cut out their call to be full-time in ministry. I think my thoughts are to help people who don't feel that, but want to help. Not feel less than or different. I've not been to seminary. That's something that's unique about me. I've got an MBA. So when like in our Pike County Ministerial Association, when I'm the total odd one out, like I feel totally like I don't belong here kind of thing. But none of that matters in God's eyes. And he puts us right where he wants us. And I've also seen in like our kids ministry is part-time. the director there, he's a baseball coach, like he's in the school. He has all these relationships that connect into our kids ministry. That's got a lot of value that if he was there full time, he would not have that.
That's so good. So good. So the guys that I see, and I'm guys, gender neutral, I just mean people, but the people that I see most frustrated about their bivocational situation is when they would like to do this full time, but for whatever reason they can't, or the church can't afford to pay them, or they can't. So they have to do something else to make money. And they wish they were over here, but they have to do this. And, in some ways, Paul in the New Testament, he makes tents so he can share the gospel, so there's a pattern in that. And actually, Paul even says, hey, it's better to give than to receive. So he said, we work hard with our own hands so we can, have enough so that then we can, because it's better to give.
Yeah.
There is that precedent. And also, your church is not, you're not as much of a burden on them. They're not required to sustain you that way. So those are all benefits. But the guys that feel frustrated, wish they could be, or maybe they feel less than at the ministerial meeting, or they can't make the daytime lunches because they got their other job they got to do, those kind of things. So it's sort of a belonging identity issue. But what I found is where bivocational is a sweet spot is kind of what you were talking about, like with that youth guy and the teacher. If you have a sense of calling and purpose, we talked about your organization or your church having a clear calling purpose.
Yeah.
If you, the person, feel that sense of high purpose and you say, hey, I am called to do this, so like for me, I feel a calling to equip leaders for service, right? So I can do that in the church. I can do that in healthcare organizations. I can do that, on podcasts for people who listen. I can wear different hats, but I'm the same person.
Right.
That's very fulfilling to me. Do what I do and be who God's called me to be in different environments. I feel very consistent, but I'm one person. I think the people that have the biggest rub and hard is when they feel called to be this, but they have to do this. That's a hard place to live for a long time. So my recommendation is take a step back and say, who has God called me to be? What is he, who has he made me to be? And then ask yourself, where all can I be that, and be you wherever you go. Some of those are going to pay more money than other places. But it's not really about, like you said, it's not about your personal financial gain. It's about you accomplishing your purpose, knowing that God can put you in different environments to do that. So for me, that's people say, hey, Mike, how do you do so many different things? I'm really just doing one thing. I'm just doing it in different places.
Right.
You
Yep, absolutely. So our partner nonprofit that we started at our church is called Faith Life Ministries, and it's built off the Ephesians 2:10. For we are God's handiwork or masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good things he prepared in advance for us to do. And so when I was working, I was bivocational, planting a church, and worked at SOAR for 5 years. And so and this was a job that was super demanding, 60 hours a week. I was traveling all over the state, all over the country, speaking places, and then preaching on the weekends. And that was the most I could do. Like I said, I can do one thing well with the church, and it's really going to be teach on Sunday mornings. And so I would spend Saturdays preparing for Sunday. I would preach through a book of the Bible, so I didn't have to come up with a creative series, or it was just we're gonna preach through the book of Acts, the book of James, we preach through Philippians, Ephesians, the story of Nehemiah, and so there was times like I felt like my work at SOAR was a ministry. It wasn't evangelistic, and I remember when I realized those good things he's preparing in advance for us to do they don't have to be straight ahead evangelistic. Like you don't have to be saying Jesus. You can be being Jesus. You can be a servant. You can be serving. And so that was the heart for Faith Life, was to help people, inspire and equip them to live out their faith, whether they're a teacher, a baseball coach, the community college professor or president or a dean or just whatever you find yourself. Realize that every believer is in full-time ministry.
Yeah.
Like wherever you're at, you're being the hands and feet and have an opportunity to be a light. and realizing the group that first went to Antioch, they just started sharing Jesus with people at the grocery store. Like, this is not wait for this grand moment in my life where I find my call. Like, it's just today. If you're a carpenter, man, go be the best carpenter
Yes.
you can be, and love the guys working beside you, or girl, and be a light. And I think when we realize that, it's not we're just called to work. We know that God's called us to get up every day and check a list out, like a comp, do something.
Mm.
And so we can get, and I'm the worst to get to, like, I'm waiting for the perfect thing, the
Mm.
specific thing. And you'll find, I think you'd probably agree, like, you don't really look back and say, "Oh, I messed up at that point," or, like,
No,
you just see that God works it all wherever you are, man. Just keep serving. That's it.
that's exactly right. Um, Last thing, thinking about that, God has brought you to a place where you have a pretty special opportunity. It's called Together for the Mountain. So I think it'd be good just for people to hear you talk about that. This is really one of probably your newest initiative that you're helping to, coordinate.
Yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about Together for the Mountains.
Yeah. This was, so when I finally, my wife, Bethany, and I, we had prayed for some time about my transition from SOAR, when would that would be. It was something I struggled with. I'd always say, if God wants me to leave, I will, but he don't want me to right now. That was always what I would always say. And there was part of me that became prideful, became part of, kind of, becomes to define you. Like, I can't imagine myself not being that person, or that title, or that role. And it was in 2020 when, like, God just completely flipped my heart. Like, all of a sudden I woke up, we've been praying. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm just doing this because I'm doing it. Like, I don't have that, before. I think I could do this my whole life. This could be my legacy, 25 years from the beginning to the end. You imagine what all that looks like. And then all of a sudden, it's like, it reminded me of, when Paul said, I was the best of the best, and it all became garbage to me. Not that I was the best of the best, but I felt that feeling of,
Yeah.
I don't even care about any of that anymore. And so I gave my resignation, and I stayed 4 months until they named my replacement. And I didn't leave for a job. When I called and said, "Hey, I'm leaving," they were like, "Well, where are you going?" I was like, "No, I don't know." I don't know where, really. I'm going to go spend some time at the church, more time at the church, and just see what's next. And so a month after that, uh, I had the first meetings with a group of people from Southland Christian Church in Lexington, who had been dreaming about and feeling a call to Eastern Kentucky in the mountains to do something. And what I find over and over is people like you, Mike, and them, and people in Letcher County, and other people across the state feeling this call, like God's doing something here, and we want to help and be a part of it.
Yeah.
And so I used to tell our elder board at church, I'd say, I don't know why I'm at SOAR and pastoring, but I would say at some point, God's going to bring all this together. Like, I don't understand why. It doesn't make sense. And so there was a meeting after several months. I'd gone to Southland for a meeting, and we were talking, and Lee Webb, the director of church planning, he said, we want to do something in Eastern Kentucky, but we don't know the area. We need somebody to help lead it. And I was looking back over the last decade of my life, and all the meetings, and the counties, and the places, and the network that God had blessed me with. And the fact that I'd planted a church and was an entrepreneur, and like all those things that didn't make sense to me. And and then he said, and we've really prayed about it. We're thinking about calling it Together for the Mountains. And like that moment, back to the words I told the elders every year for God's going to bring all this together. Like that confirmation of, because there was, in the first few months, there was wondering, like, did I make the right decision? Was leaving the right thing to do? And not for me personally, but the transition didn't go how I thought it would go. and at SOAR, but it was just those confirmations over time of, yeah, this is what's next for you. And so now we're working to just build this network, very similar work to what I was doing, but with a kingdom focus, with churches and nonprofits and any faith, entrepreneurs that have a faith driven motivation, to come together and create a community of those people who say we want to serve, as a movement really to leave Eastern Kentucky better than we found it, um, is what we're in the middle of kind of putting together.
Oh man, and of course that's really how we got connected because even before I came to Kentucky, our church had started a mission location in Breathitt County in Eastern
Yeah.
Kentucky. Been there about 12 years now, and for us, again, we kept saying, "Man, God's doing good work. It's we're progressing, but who else cares about this area? Who else cares about these kids?" And then when I met you and you start talking about, man, together for the mountains, I said, boy, that's it. We've been going in that same direction. I just
Yeah.
didn't know we were out there.
That's it. And I think what we see is God's doing this. This is the beautiful thing about this work is the other work, to find people, motivate and guide and direct. This, man, the Holy Spirit is working individually in people and bringing it like, this is low pressure. Like I just got to be faithful. Like God's doing all the heavy lifting in this and the work. And so it's really incredible to see already the partners and the people who are kind of say, yeah, this resonates with my heart. And it's rewarding for me to see that and to be kind of right in the middle of it.
When our conversation airs, people will be listening. It'll be October, and October 11th will have just been a pretty big event, which pretty cool because you talked about the way you had that first summit with the two governors coming together and filling off that arena, and you're basically going to have done the same thing for Together for the Mountains. Is that right?
Yeah, that's kind of the vision is that it's weird for me back in that same arena, that same place, doing similar work. And it's going to be fun to go back and watch after the summit and listen to. But I'm just praying we have a great turnout of people who just have common hearts, that they leave completely inspired, that new partnerships come out of that there's people who are thinking about planting a church, but didn't feel like they had the network or the support or the encouragement to do it, but are getting serious about it and say, okay, like there's people who are excited about this. They want to help me, not just a denomination, but a community of interdenomination people with like-minded, that's Jesus-centered, cheering me on and coaching me and supporting me. Maybe new social enterprises, new churches, doing new programs and initiatives and ministries, learning from each other. This is not come listen to me. This is come share with each other, encourage one another. And so I'm just excited to see this first one. And I know where it has the potential to go from here.
Hey, if somebody is listening and they would like to, maybe they're hearing about it for the first time, Together for the Mountains, if they wanted to help or support the movement, what are there any particular things they could do?
Yeah, just go to the website, togetherforthemountains.com, and there's a link there right now. You can join you can submit it says join the network, I think, or movement, and you can put your organization name that, and we can follow up with you and connect with you. If you'd like to donate and give, you can do that there. We really envision this being a backbone organization, doing the things we talked about earlier, convenings, communications, and coaching, and just empowering and equipping the network to do the heavy lifting on the ground. And so it's going to be a small organization, but we would love eventually to have like a new ventures fund that we could raise if God wants to bless with resources that could be passed through into helping churches launch new ministries or church plants or projects, just to be a conduit to help move God's work forward.
Yeah, well, there's certainly a lot of kids and haulers in Eastern Kentucky who who could use some attention. And I think it's Stadia church planners that say a church for every kid. And
Yeah.
that's not all this is, but that's certainly part of it, is bringing good news and good works into areas who could really benefit from it. Man, hey, I just really appreciate your time. We have done. I could just keep talking to you forever, but for the sake of the listener, we're gonna sign off. So thanks so much, Jared, for making some time. And we're really praying God's blessings on Together for the Mountains and all your different initiatives that you're part of. So
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Now we want to land the conversation, the part of the podcast where we prepare you to put this into practice. Hey, we just heard from Jared Arnett and Dr. Mike McCormick. You guys talked about purpose-driven partnerships and communities. And so one of my questions is, I think what we've seen before is leaders and organizations that have had that person-centered leadership where it has been on a main leader's shoulders. And we're talking about switching it over to a purpose-centered leadership and how good of an idea that is. But how do we actually do that? If you're talking to a leader and an organization that's always been one man focused or maybe a couple men focused, right? How do we actually start to make that switch in our language, our culture, our structure? Speak into that.
Yeah, so good. And again, I'm not sure that one is right or wrong, but I do think that the purpose-centered approach is working now for several reasons that we've talked about in the past. So for anyone who says, hey, we want to make that shift from just hanging our hat on this organization around a person to really hanging it on the purpose, there is a couple things that really help with that shift. One, I think, is in the idea of shared leadership. So instead of having one primary upfront spokesperson, having people to be able to step in and step out of the spotlight is super helpful. So it doesn't have to be a ton of people, but sharing that with one more person or maybe two other people. And so that the visible person, there are a few spokespeople for that organization. So I think sharing leadership at the top, in particular, the spotlight on critical matters and being the voice, that's really helpful. Wherever people see as kind of the primary leadership, if that becomes shared, that helps. What then they can do is all of them, whoever that leadership team is, they continue to articulate the why, what the purpose is. And so no matter which one you're listening to, the same priorities come out, right? The same purpose comes out. And that becomes a picture of sharing purpose. And there's a we language, not so much a me language that is involved with it. When it comes to like getting that down into culture, though, I think a lot of times, we start to measure things instead of just by the metrics of our spreadsheets, but by telling stories. And stories is a way that we can articulate the common purpose and change that we want to see. So if your purpose, is to transform a community, or your purpose is to, for the health of your members, finding the individual stories, not the mass numbers, but the individual impact that you're making in the one, and then being able to say, and this kind of care or this kind of transformation is happening in this person's life, and that is what we want to see scaled, over and over again. That's what we are about. So changing that, sharing the leadership, telling those stories, I think can be really helpful. And then changing the scoreboard from the volume of numbers really to the value of one, and what the picture of that life change or that purpose looks like, and articulating that over and over again. I think that's super helpful.
Yeah, that's really helpful. When we're talking about changing even that leadership structure of being one person to multiple people, what would be some of, let's call them credentials or, factors that you would want to look into when you're selecting partners to, do the work together?
Yeah, great question. So what I was just articulating there could be like in a single organization, but as we start to kind of broaden that out to say, how could we either partner with our own leadership team, or maybe across departments within an organization, or maybe an organization with other organizations to transform a community or a region, right? Whenever you're looking for how do we share this responsibility so that we can all go to the same purpose, a couple things that happen. And here, what I find generally is that these start in conversations. It's usually not a formal meeting. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's in informal conversations where you're getting to know someone. and you start to articulate what really matters to you personally and what's most important to you as an individual or from the organization that you represent. And as you start to articulate that, some people are really going to resonate with that. And so I think the first ingredient for a good partner is that they share the same purpose, that you are like-purposed people. They may be coming at it from a different angle, different perspective, but it kind of at your gut, at your core, you're about the same thing. You want to see the same kind of change. You're dissatisfied with the same status quo that's happening. You want to see the needle moved in the same direction. There's something that, you kind of generate this commonality with this similarity. So a common purpose, I think, is where it starts. But in order to be a good partner, if you're exactly the same in all the areas, then you're just really duplicating yourself. To be a partner, I think you also have to have not just common purpose, but complementary contribution so that you have the same goal, the same outcome, but you bring different value to that relationship. So, when we started our community sports league, we had 6 different churches. And one of the values we brought was every church location was in a different physical location as part of our community. So we have different, literally have a set of train tracks in our community. And generally speaking, the Black community and the poor communities on one side of the tracks, and then the rest of the community lives on the other side of the tracks. And we have churches who were on both sides of the tracks, if you will, in those different communities. And so part of our goal to bring the community together meant that we could actually have people move into spaces in parts of our community that they had maybe even never been. They may have lived in this town for, all their whole life, but never been to that part of town, if you will. So, because of that, we have the same goal, same purpose, but we bring some value because of where we're physically located. We're able to expose people in our community to a different part of town. So that kind of thing, it's got to be common purpose. You're united. You feel a sense of similar passion, and yet you have different skills, different strengths, different contributions. You bring you add value in a different way, so that as they say, you're better together than you would be on your own.
It sounds like, the fast-paced work culture where it's all about metrics and results, it's really kind of changing it, even making space for real conversations and curiosity for the people that are around us. I love that you said conversations, because a lot of times I think we come into meetings and we talk about results and we talk about strategy, but how well do we know the people we're working with? How do we dream together? What kind of values do we share? I think part of maybe changing that culture within workspace is allowing those kind of conversations to happen as well, allowing the space for them,
Yes.
and the time to get to know people.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that a lot of these get at kind of the core of who people are. And so some time and space to slow down a little bit to get to know someone, or to really engage at a bit of a deeper level, so that it may not be the bullet on the agenda, but that's really the most important thing. So there's some of that. I certainly, there's still fast pace. And the thing is, once you are united together, once you get a common picture, then you can actually move pretty quickly together. So it's not like it's just slowing the things down, but I do think there's some kind of go slow to speed up type situations. The other thing is getting to know some people before you even know that you need something, that they need something from you. Like, I really like Jared, how he said, man, when I get to meet someone, this I think was in the first episode with him, he said, I'm here to see how can I serve you. And I think just getting to know people, and we've said in other podcasts that results move at the speed of relationships, like just building your relationships before you're asking anybody for anything. You just genuinely get to know a person for who they are, or their role in the organization, and what matters to them, and actually caring about that, being curious, like you said, doing that kind of work before the need itself presents itself, I think is real helpful. Because then when you have those relationships and they know that you care about them, and you know that they care about you, then when a particular need arises, that you have the discernment to see, boy, if we came together, we could tackle this thing better together. Then you're able to put that need out in front of someone and draw other people to that. But probably you've already had that relationship. If you're just trying to build that relationship in that moment, it may be a little too late. Or if they have a strong enough commonality, that relationship may gel more quickly. In the case of, meeting new people or new partners, but you probably have a kind of a common core already, and you'll be adding to that and building onto it. So yeah, I think relationships are the key, and you really do have to actually care about something more than yourself. You have to care about the people. You have to care about the problem, the common purpose you have. It requires you to get outside yourself and be purpose oriented in your own heart and mind.
Yeah, such a good point. What would you say to people that might have a hard time even right now talking and finding people that would share vision or networking in general as a skill, talking to people and, is that skill kind of being lost through the years right now? And so talk a little bit about networking and what would you say to someone struggling with that?
Yeah, it's funny because you think with like social media or social networking that we ought to be pretty adept at it with all of the technology and tools that we have at our disposal. But I really do see something different happening right now, where a lot of the people showing up for work or coming to these conversations basically are still pretty focused on themselves, and that's probably part of our human condition, that we all care about us first. But really, this, I don't even know if that's a skill as much as it is a character trait or an attitude to say, hey, I'm going to care about you more than just myself. And so I'm going to get to know you. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to actually have a dialogue conversation, go grab a coffee, stay after the meeting for 10 more minutes to chat a little bit with you. I'm going to have an interaction with you that I'm not trying to get something from you right now. I'm literally just trying to get to know you so I can, see who you are, and if there'll be an opportunity down the road where I can serve you, and maybe that will be, reciprocal. So I think there is a need for this kind of space to get past yourself and really get to know other people. And then eventually saying, now also, what are some causes that are bigger than me? And if you can meet some people and be caring more about them, and you can see some things that you want to change in this world, and instead of basically being critical and tearing other people down, actually caring about trying to build something up. Because as soon as you see a problem, I'll give you a great example. So yesterday, I actually went to the Together for the Mountains convening that Jared organized. So Jared put that together, and I don't know the exact number. There's probably about 100 people or so in this arena, the Appalachian Wireless Arena in Pikeville, Kentucky.
Wow.
And he invited all of these people that he had relationships with. And the reason they were there is because they all cared about Eastern Kentucky. They all cared about Appalachia. And they were all there because they had a particular thing they did, or part of the problem that they were working on. Some were social entrepreneurs, some were, ministries, nonprofits, churches, all these different groups of people coming together. But they all had a common purpose, right? So he brought them together. And it was just really cool to be in a room with other people who care about the same thing. And then you getting to know them. And he actually introduced us to each other and said, hey, we want you to, take the time today to meet somebody new here, find out what they do. And don't you know it, but leading up to that workshop, there was a guy that I met, Jared introduced me to. We have a clinic that we're starting, a dental clinic for kids in Eastern Kentucky. And one of the other guys had a wife who's a pediatric dentist, and she has a real heart for using her dentist skills to serve kids in Eastern Kentucky. So we have a property, we have a building and a clinic that's going to be opening, but we didn't have enough dentists to come. So she's actually going to come and be our first pediatric dentist to do a free dental clinic in Eastern Kentucky in our space. And Jared helped to organize that, one, by just bringing people together who all care about the same thing, but they all have a unique, different skill set. And when you get those people together and you start having conversations, that's when I think the magic happens. So I want to thank Jared for doing that. But I think he's just modeling what the next generation leader is intuitive about, which says we're going to care about something bigger than us. And we're going to ask the question, who else cares? Who else cares about that? And when we find other people who care about that, then we say, hey, how can we contribute? What can we do together that will make us better together? So I'm grateful for Jared, especially today.
Yeah, and I love that Jared mentioned that he was an introvert, because a lot of times I think that we would assume a good person that networks is an extrovert who's out there, who loves to talk with people, but really it's so much less about ourselves as it is about caring about the needs and seeing the needs and saying, how can I be a part of that? And so not allowing maybe some of those personality traits to hinder us from the things that are in our hearts, the desires and the needs that we see.
Yeah.
You talked a
Right.
little bit about equation for change. I know you guys talked a little bit about some of the factors, but tell us that your equation for change. I thought this was so good.
Yeah, yeah. Jared talked about the need for dissatisfaction and for a vision. So we have a little equation for change, which is change equals the letter D times V times FS, and all that has to be greater than the letter I. And all those things stand for dissatisfaction. The D, dissatisfaction times the vision for the future, times some clear first steps. If you can articulate the dissatisfaction that you have with the current status quo, a vision for a better future, and then lay out some quick first steps for people, if all of that comes together and is greater than the inertia to just keep things back the way it is, then change will happen. Then
Okay.
change will happen. But if that inertia to just stay the same or keep it the way it is, if any one of those other pieces is missing, then it won't happen. If you're not dissatisfied enough with status quo, if you don't have a picture of where you're going, and if you can't articulate a few first steps in the direction, then you'll really get stagnant. So yeah, I love Jared is doing that right now, and I thought of that same equation when he was putting out those things. So hopefully that'll be helpful.
Yeah, looking at dissatisfaction, not necessarily as a negative thing, but an opportunity for change, and I think I maybe just a generation that I'm a part of right now, a lot of us are dissatisfied with the way things are and the ways that work culture is and wanting change, but not knowing what to do about it. And so I think that there is these two ditches here where dissatisfaction can lead us to really being disengaged or lead us to criticism, like you mentioned earlier. But reharnessing that and saying, man, recognizing I'm not satisfied with something, but may this be an opportunity for something different. May I be a part of that, contribute to that. I love that equation.
Yeah, a lot of people can articulate what they don't want, what they're dissatisfied with, what they're upset with. Not as many people can articulate what they really do want and what the outcome really looks like. I think the switch from just being a critic to being a leader is we both share dissatisfaction, but the leader's able to articulate something better and then invite people to come along in that process. And when you have that, when you can, translate dissatisfaction into a better preferred future, and find other people who are attracted by that same future, that magnet that pulls you together, now you've got the ingredients, not just for change, but for partners who can work together to, to bring that change into reality.
Yeah. Wow. So good. Well, I think, for our listeners, this is what Dr. Mike does. And if you want to work with Dr. Mike, bringing people together with diverse backgrounds and working in better partnerships, you can find out more information on how you can do that by going to highpurposepractice.com. And if you want to learn a little bit more about Jared Arnett's organization, Together with the Mountains, we will have a link in our description as well. So check that out. Thanks for listening to the High Purpose Leadership Podcast. To work with Dr. Mike McCormick, head over to highpurposepractice.com.